and in his literary efforts, the Maharaja of Baroda and Kolhapur, they had made significant contributions in terms of sponsoring, or one can say that, providing him with the scholarship, which was required for his study in University of Columbia and London, and he had earned his PhD at the same time. He also had earned a law degree in Britain. He had written a very, uh, I would say, uh, analytical and literary, books and essays, which has come down to us, and some of his publications are still considered to be very valuable, right? So, some of them which I can name here, the thesis which he had written, and that's what was later published, in the form of book, and which is still available. And I think, some of the websites, and I think Ministry of External Affairs of India too, it has given open access to this work, right? So the thesis that he had written was the problem of rupee, its origin and solution, right? So that's where he had tried to look at what were the real problems of colonial economy. That is one. So he was an economist. He was a trained economist, in fact, and he had gained his degree from London School of Economics. That is one we have to keep in mind. So we know Ambedkar more as a leader of the depressed classes, and his personality is more known for having championed the cause of the depressed classes. But he was a very trained economist, right? We know him more as a chairperson of the drafting committee of the Indian Constitution, wherein Ambedkar is again taken to be a symbol of having given rather to India, at a kind of constitution, a kind of having given to India, a kind of constitution which would be valuable in its own way. But Ambedkar had a very significant approach, towards had a significant approach towards economy and apart from having a good understanding of politics and society, he also had good command over economics. So that is one we find, and I will refer to some of his approaches, especially the way how he understands that the important role a state can play in terms of bringing about desired socio-economic changes. So that's what also we would look at during the course of our discussion. Apart from that, a few more works that I can mention here as far as Ambedkar is concerned. The annihilation of caste. So that is the another work which Ambedkar has contributed, right? Then the castes in India, their mechanism, genesis, and development. That's yet another work on caste, that Ambedkar has contributed. Then the untouchables. Who are they and why they became untouchables? Right. Then he has also written something on international relations. So in Pakistan, right? Pakistan or partition, or thoughts on Pakistan. So these are his works, on India-Pakistan relations and how he looked at the whole issue of partition. In fact, this had some way an impact on his approach towards the separate electorate issue for the depressed classes. So that's where it would be important for us to to refer to some of these works, right? So this is how one can mention some of his works, which give us insight into his thoughts which are linked to the sociological explanation of the caste system in India, and the way he understood that how in some way this problem could be addressed. Now with this short introduction, I would go back and I would try to conceptualize Ambedkar's approach towards politics, and how he would look at the whole issue of law and politics in terms of bringing about social changes. Now that is also the issue which possibly would make Ambedkar different in his approach from other political leaders of his time. So, as far as other political leaders of his time were concerned, Gandhi, for instance. So, of course, they had some specific approach towards politics, and therein they would take a stand wherein they would have their own views as far as India's independence and self-rule would be concerned. But in their understanding, the society had its own dynamics and its own sphere. And in their understanding, in this sphere, there were certain changes or reformations required. And these changes and reformations may happen by taking initiatives, by appealing to the people that the problems of the day, for instance, untouchability, right? For instance, ill treatment to the lower castes. So, ill treatment to the lower castes. So, these were inhuman in nature, and no religion perhaps would sanction it. So, these reformations or changes can happen by appealing to the people to change their attitude, and by appealing to the people to change their approach towards the members of the depressed classes or lower castes. But Ambedkar would take a different view, and Ambedkar would understand that the whole problem was perhaps due to the fact that the depressed classes or the lower castes, they were not politically empowered. So for him, this was the problem of political empowerment. And in his understanding, once the depressed classes, they would become politically empowered, then this would give them a sense of confidence, a sense of strength and power within. So what Ambedkar possibly would look at, that the whole problems related to depressed classes and untouchability has to be addressed in its psychological dimension. Meaning that, somewhere the position that the untouchables or the depressed classes, they held in the Indian society, that had got internalized, right? That had got internalized in their minds, that had become part of their psyche. And somehow they had come to accept their position in the Indian society. And this is what had to be done. And this could not be done simply by appealing to the people that they should change their attitude, appealing to the members of the higher castes or to the dominant classes that they should change their overall approach towards the members of the depressed classes or untouchables. But rather than, it would happen only when they are politically empowered, right? And this sense of power would give them confidence. And out of this confidence, they would be in a position to rise above the status which they had come to accept in Indian society at that point of time. Now, that is where Ambedkar would look at state, and that is where Ambedkar would look at law as a mechanism to bring about these changes. So a state had to play a role, and unless the depressed classes or unless the untouchables, they would have proper representation in state institutions like institutions of his time. So Governor General's Executive Council, or the Legislative Council, for instance, right? So only through the means of their position in these institutions, they would be in a position to attain the status, what was due to them in Ambedkar's understanding. So that is what would bring about changes, and this would lead to the kind of backing that reformations would require from the law of the state. This would get the backing of the state in terms of enforcement. And that is where, in Ambedkar's understanding, that the role of the state, role of laws, and role of state institutions, they become important, right? So the changes that would happen in social sphere has to have the backing of the state, has to have the backing of politics. So politics would lead the changes in social sphere, right? It is the politics which would ensure that society gets reformed. So this reformation is something which is linked to the larger changes which first happen in the political arena, which would first happen in the political sphere, right? And then the changes in the social sphere, the reformation in the social sphere, that would follow on its own. That's what his approach would be.